really happens when a school bully chooses the wrong 72-year-old woman to mess with. 10 seconds later, the entire hallway goes silent, and Deshaun Dillard learns a lesson no teacher ever managed to teach him. They called him D, not for dominance, not for discipline, and definitely not for his grades, just short for Dillard. Deshaun Dillard, 15 years old, already 6'1", and walking around Booker T. Washington Middle School in Toledo, Ohio, like he owned the building. He had one of those thin teenage mustaches he swore made him look like a grown man, and a permanent half-smirk that said, "What are you gonna do about it?" Deshaun didn't just move through school, he charged through it, shoulders squared, hoodie halfway on, even when it was freezing, chin always tilted like he was looking down at the world. He treated every hallway like a red carpet. His sneakers squeaked on the tile like warning sirens, and every time he passed a locker, he slapped it, loud, just to let people know he was there. Nobody stopped him. Not the teachers, who had long learned to look the other way. Not the hall monitors, who gave him space like he was radioactive. Not even the assistant principal, who just sighed every time Deshaun's name came up, as if he was tired of losing the same battle over and over again. Deshaun always rolled deep. 3 other boys followed him like a little entourage: Rico, Jayan, and Snoop. Snoop's real name was Theodore, but Deshaun made sure nobody ever used it. That Thursday morning, Deshaun arrived late, as usual. The bell had already rung. He walked in slow, like he was doing the school a favor just by showing up. He checked his phone mid-stride, then tucked it back in his hoodie pocket without even looking up. That's when he spotted the kid. 7th grader, small, nervous, walking fast, both arms wrapped around a cracked school laptop like it might fall apart if he breathed wrong. Deshaun didn't miss a beat. He stepped right into the boy's path, forcing him to stop short. "Yo, watch out," Deshaun snapped. The kid flinched, said sorry like it was a reflex. Deshaun just shook his head and followed behind him. "Man, y'all always looking scared," he said loudly, glancing over his shoulder at his crew. "It's school, not prison." Rico snorted. Jayan laughed. Snoop grinned with his hoodie pulled low. Deshaun reached the front office, even though he had no reason to be there. That didn't matter. He pushed the door open with his whole shoulder, like he was walking into a locker room before a championship game. "Yo," he called out to the room. "Y'all got cookies in here? Smells like somebody's grandma been baking." That's when he saw her. She stood with her back to him, facing the secretary's desk, wearing a maroon skirt suit, black flats, and a wide-brimmed hat with rhinestones that caught the flickering overhead light. Her posture was upright, shoulders straight, hands folded over a black handbag. She didn't glance back. She didn't flinch. Deshaun squinted. He leaned toward the counter and muttered, "Whose grandma is this?" "Miss Jackie from the block." Laughter echoed behind him. Still, she didn't move. Not even a shrug, not even a sigh. That silence? It hit him. Most people either ignored him or tried to laugh with him. But her calm? It wasn't passive. It was deliberate. And that only made him push harder. So Deshaun walked closer. Too close. Close enough to brush against her on purpose as he circled around her toward the front of the desk. "D," Rico warned quietly from the hallway. "Yo, chill out." But Deshaun didn't listen. His ego had taken the wheel. "Ain't you supposed to be in a home or something?" he said, louder now, grinning. "You lost, ma'am? Need help finding the bingo room?" Still nothing. Then, finally, she turned. Slowly, deliberately. Her eyes met his, and the moment they did, the room changed. No fear, no hesitation. Just 2 sharp, steady eyes staring straight through him. And in a voice smooth as silk, but firm as steel, she said, "I suggest you back up." Deshaun blinked. He wasn't used to that. Usually, people looked away, laughed nervously, or tried to ignore him altogether. But not her. "Nah, I'm good," he said, trying to play it off. "You don't know who I am, do you?" And then she smiled, just slightly. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that meant, you just made a mistake, and now you're going to learn. The secretary behind the desk reached quietly for the walkie clipped to her belt. The assistant principal stepped into the doorway, holding a cup of coffee mid-sip, suddenly alert. Everyone else in the room seemed to understand something Deshawn didn't. This wasn't someone's grandma. This wasn't a visitor who needed help. This wasn't someone he could intimidate. Deshawn was about to learn what happens when confidence meets consequence. And it wouldn't take long, but confidence only lasts so long, especially when life starts calling your bluff. Deshawn let out a quick scoff and turned to look at his boys, expecting the usual backup, the familiar laugh track to follow his punchlines. But this time, nothing. Rico and Snoop weren't laughing anymore. Even Jalen, usually the loudest hype man in the group, was standing by the door, shifting his weight like he couldn't decide whether to stay or disappear. Then the woman, still calm, still collected, I turned to the secretary and said, "Miss Ellen, would you let Principal Weathers know I've arrived? Tell him Sergeant Freeman is here." Just like that, the whole room shifted. You could feel it. The energy snapped tight like someone had dropped a name no one was ready to hear. Sergeant. That one word hung in the air like smoke. Deshawn blinked. Wait, what? Sergeant Freeman. Principal Weathers had spoken to her by name. And not just her name, her title. Deshawn stood up straighter, unconsciously trying to compose himself. But he still tried to keep it casual, like it didn't matter. Wait. Hold up, Sergeant? She looked at him again. Not angry, not smug, just solid. "Yes, baby," she said calmly. "I served 22 years in the Army. I've faced real conflict, real fear, and I've dealt with boys like you." She let that sit. Her smile faded, her voice sharpened. "You're not problems," she added. "You're projects, and I've gotten real good at fixing those." That line hit harder than Deshawn would ever admit. It wasn't said to humiliate, it wasn't said to threaten. It was said like a fact, like someone who'd been through fire and wasn't about to back down from a hallway parade act. Deshawn took a small step back, trying to save face. "Man, whatever," he muttered under his breath. But Mrs. Freeman wasn't finished. She turned toward him fully now, lifted her purse and rested it on her forearm, like she was suiting up. "Where's your class, young man?" He looked away. "Why you care?" "Because," she replied, "I'll be in it, starting today." His eyes snapped back to hers. She wasn't joking. "Principal Weathers asked me to take over 8th grade social studies. Room 214, right?" Deshawn's stomach dropped. That was his class. Miss Langford had been out on medical leave, and nobody had said who'd be filling in. But now? Now the woman who just cut through his ego like a blade was going to be in the front of his classroom with a roster and authority. She looked like someone who should be on the church steps, handing out mints and blessings, not rewriting a middle schooler's future. She wasn't even 5 feet 5 inches, but the air around her, it felt heavy, like a lie wouldn't survive near her, like excuses couldn't breathe. "Don't worry," she said, as she walked past him slowly, purposefully. "We've got plenty of time to get to know each other." And then she was gone. The door shut softly behind her. The office was silent. Deshawn just stood there. For once, no comeback, no laugh. Miss Ellen looked over the top of her glasses. "Boy," she said, "you just signed up for a lesson you ain't ready for." Deshawn muttered, "She ain't even a real teacher." But then, the assistant principal, who hadn't said a word up to this point, stepped out of his office, finally sipping his coffee. "She's more than a teacher," he said. "She led soldiers, ran missions. She was brought here for a reason, 'cause some of y'all started thinking school was a playground." And that landed. Deshawn felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, maybe ever. Not fear, not shame, something smaller, quieter, like a voice inside whispering, "You're not in charge anymore." By the time he reached room 214, that whisper had become a full-blown reality check. The room sat at the end of the second-floor hallway, right next to the stairwell with the flickering light nobody ever fixed. Deshawn walked slower than usual, dragging his steps, like maybe, just maybe, she'd be gone by the time he got there. She wasn't. Mrs. Eloise Freeman stood at the whiteboard with a marker already in hand. Her handwriting was strong, clean, precise, the kind of handwriting that didn't wobble or second-guess itself. Across the board, in large capital letters, she had written, "Discipline is a form of love." The class was silent. Normally, this room was chaos. Paper balls flying, someone yelling in the back, the teacher struggling to be heard. But not today. You could hear kids breathing. Even the air felt still. Deshawn's seat, his usual throne in the back, suddenly looked a mile away. He pushed open the door. She didn't even turn around. "Glad you could join us, Mr. Dillard," she said, her voice calm, her hand still writing. Mr. Dillard. No one called him that unless he was in serious trouble. A few kids turned their heads wide-eyed. No one said a word. He sat down, slower than usual. No slouching, no smirking, just sitting. Finally, she turned to face them, cool, controlled. "I know most of you haven't met me yet," she said. "I'm Miss Freeman. I don't yell, I don't chase, I don't repeat myself." She let the silence sit, let it settle. "Now," she continued, tapping a stack of folders on her desk, "we're starting today with something different. No textbook, no screens, just a question." She turned and wrote again. "Who am I when no one's watching?" Groans echoed lightly, but not the usual dramatic ones, just quiet resistance. Even Deshawn stayed silent. Usually, he'd have cracked a joke by now, flipped a pen, made a scene. Instead, he leaned back, arms crossed, watching her. Miss Freeman walked the rows slowly, the way soldiers walk patrol, calm, steady, present. When she stopped at Deshawn's desk, she looked down. His paper was blank. She didn't say a word. "Nothing to say, Mr. Dillard?" she asked quietly, almost like she wasn't even expecting an answer. Deshawn didn't lift his eyes. He just stared down at the empty page in front of him, pencil still untouched. "I don't know what you want me to say," he muttered. "I don't want you to say anything," she replied. "I want you to think." Then, she added something that cut deeper than anything a teacher had ever said to him. "That's your real problem, isn't it? You're louder than your thoughts, and that's dangerous." His head lifted, slowly. Their eyes met for a second. No anger in hers, just clarity, and something more. Something that felt a lot like truth. "I know boys like you," she said, not with judgment, but like someone reading a weather report. "You think if you walk hard and talk louder than the room, no one will notice the scared child underneath all that noise." The classroom was silent. You could feel something shift, not just in him, but in everyone. She didn't scold. She didn't shout. She just saw him. And then she walked away, like she hadn't just cracked open the front he'd been hiding behind for years. 2 rows over, a girl leaned sideways in her chair, trying to get a better look at his face. He caught her eye, shot her a warning glare, but he didn't say anything. Mrs. Freeman returned to the front of the class. "Here's the truth," she said, tapping her pen softly against her desk. "There are 2 kinds of people in this world, those who get by on fear and those who earn respect. Fear fades, respect stays." A hand slowly lifted. It was Kesha, the quietest girl in the room, barely ever spoke. "Were you really in the army?" Mrs. Freeman smiled. "Yes, 22 years. Started as a private, retired as a sergeant. I've been in places where people didn't care if you lived or died. I trained men twice your size to respect life and themselves. And now I'm here, because your principal believes some of you need the same lesson." She didn't say it as a threat. She said it like math, like a formula she'd used before. Deshawn looked down at his blank paper. His fingers finally moved. Pencil touching the page, just for a moment, something inside him shifted. Not everything, but something. Then, just when the classroom started to feel grounded, like maybe a new rhythm was settling in, Deshawn's pride came roaring back. He wasn't ready to be changed. Not yet. Not like that. He sat through the rest of the day in silence, but inside, he was spiraling. Mrs. Freeman had thrown off his whole balance. The way she looked at him like she already knew everything, like she'd seen much worse than a hallway bully, like she didn't have time to be impressed by his noise. But it wasn't fear he felt. Not exactly. It was something smaller, something sharper. "You're louder than your thoughts, and that's dangerous." That line stuck to him like glue. At lunch, he sat in the back corner with Rico, Jalen, and Snoop. But even the vibe at their table was off. Rico kept checking his phone. Jalen was halfway through his sandwich without saying a single joke. Snoop was just pulling the crust off his pizza, quiet. Finally, Rico broke the silence. "You good, D?" Deshawn shrugged. "Man, I'm straight. She just caught me off guard, talking like I'm soft." Snoop looked up. I mean, you did bump her on purpose? So? Deshawn snapped. Snoop leaned in a little. So? She didn't even blink. That was kind of wild. Deshawn leaned back in his seat. Man, I ain't scared of no old lady. But the truth was, he wasn't scared of her fists. It was her presence, like gravity, that made him feel small. Like all his noise wouldn't protect him anymore. Then Rico dropped a line that made everyone freeze. Loki. I think she saw through you, D. Deshawn looked up slowly. Say what? Rico didn't back down. You always cracking jokes, pushing people. She ain't flinch. She ain't yell. She just looked at you, said what she had to say, and somehow everyone in the room sat up straighter. I don't think she's scared of anything. Deshawn tried to brush it off, changed the subject, talked about new Jordans, some video he saw, but the weight didn't move. His chest was tight. His fingers tapped restlessly on the table. By sixth period, he'd made a decision, a dumb one, but one he thought would remind everyone, especially her, that Deshaun Dillard wasn't someone you checked. So he made a plan. Right after the final bell rang, he headed straight to the front office. Told the secretary he needed to talk to Principal Weathers about his schedule. Total lie. He knew Mrs. Freeman always signed out in person at the end of the day. And there she was, already waiting. Back turned. Same maroon skirt suit. Same rhinestone hat. Same posture, calm but unshakable. He stepped in behind her. This time, closer. No laughter behind him. No Hiku. No Jalen. No Snoop. Just him and whatever was about to happen. She turned. Their eyes met again. Didn't I already tell you to back up? Software sharp, unbothered. Deshawn clenched his jaw. You don't scare me. She nodded once. I'm not trying to. A pause. I'm trying to save you. He rolled his eyes. Save me? From what? She looked at him. Not angry. Just steady. From yourself. And that was the line that finally hit bone. Pride boiled in his throat. His voice rose. And this time, he couldn't take it back. Deshawn snapped. He rose, breath shallow, voice sharp. You don't know me, he blurted. And then, a choice. One more step forward. One more mistake. Out of pure frustration, Deshawn bumped her shoulder again. It wasn't a full push, but it wasn't accidental either. It was intentional, small, sharp. Enough to cross a line he didn't fully understand. The room stopped. Miss Ellen froze mid-typing. A counselor who had just walked in stood still in the doorway. Even the office printer, mid-page, fell silent, like it didn't want to be a witness. And Mrs. Freeman, she didn't stumble. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even blink. Instead, she reached out, calm, deliberate, and gently gripped his wrist. Not tight, not forceful, just enough to let him feel the line he'd crossed. Then she leaned in, just close enough that her voice didn't need to rise. Her breath warm, her presence heavy. Let me tell you something, young man, she said, her voice steady. Cold steel wrapped in velvet. Where I come from, disrespect has a cost, and the problem with you is no one's made you pay yet. Deshawn's face flushed. He yanked his arm back fast. What, you gonna hit me now? He snapped, suddenly loud again, searching for control. Mrs. Freeman stepped back, folded her arms. I don't need to lay hands on you. She paused. Life's going to do that for me, if you keep this up. Just then, the assistant principal appeared behind them. His jaw was clenched, voice tight. Deshawn, my office now. Mrs. Freeman didn't say another word. She turned away like the conversation was over, like she'd already said everything that needed saying. But Deshawn wasn't finished. Not in his head. Man, this whole school fake, he shouted, his voice echoing off the office walls. Y'all let some old lady come in here and talk crazy. I ain't scared of her. She just mad she old. Mrs. Freeman stopped in the doorway, didn't turn around, didn't raise her hand, just said loud enough for the room to hear, better to be old and wise than young and foolish. Wisdom survives, foolishness gets buried, and then silence. But what happened next, even she didn't see coming. Deshawn sat across from Principal Weathers, legs bouncing under the table like an engine that couldn't shut off. His hoodie was halfway on again, like armor, like a shell he didn't know how to take off. Weathers didn't speak right away. He just looked at the boy in front of him, then sighed and leaned forward, fingers steepled like a tired preacher. Do you know who that woman is? He asked softly. Deshaun rolled his eyes. Yeah, Army lady, retired or whatever. Weathers leaned in, voice firmer now. Number, she's more than that. She's been through war, real war, Afghanistan, Iraq, led men who didn't want to follow anyone, and they followed her, respected her. Then he added, You think she came out of retirement for you? No, son. She came because I asked her to, because you're not the only one in this building crashing into everything and calling it personality. Deshaun shifted in his seat. His voice dropped. She didn't have to grab me, though. It came out weak. Even he heard it. Principal Weathers narrowed his eyes. She didn't hurt you. She stopped you. There's a difference. He leaned closer, voice steady. You're lucky she has that much restraint. You put hands on her, twice, in front of staff, in front of students, in front of yourself. That last part hit harder than Deshaun expected. Then, something Deshaun didn't see coming. She's willing to talk to you, Weathers said, but only if you ask. Deshaun opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Weathers continued. She's in room 214 now, packing up. You can walk out of here thinking the world owes you something. Or you can go ask a woman who's seen the worst of humanity how she kept her soul clean. He stood up. You've got 10 minutes. After that, she's gone. The hallway felt different now. Longer, quieter. Deshaun's sneakers barely squeaked. There was no Rico, no Jalen, no Snoop, just the hum of fluorescent lights, and the sound of his own thoughts finally catching up. When he reached room 214, the door was slightly open. Mrs. Freeman was at the desk, sliding papers into a leather bag. Her hat was gone. Short gray curls now visible, soft but strong. He stood there in silence for a moment, then knocked. She looked up, said nothing. He scratched the back of his neck. I didn't mean to. No, she said, cutting him off. You did. You meant every word, every step. Don't lie now just because it didn't go your way. He nodded. She was right. I don't know why I get like that, he said. I get mad, fast, and then it's like I'm not even thinking. She studied him for a second, then pointed to the chair in front of her desk. Sit. He sat. No attitude, no jokes, just a boy who finally ran out of noise. She leaned forward, elbows on the desk, fingers laced. Do you think being angry makes you strong? He hesitated. I guess. I don't like people thinking they can punk me. Mrs. Freeman shook her head slowly. You know what I learned in the service? She asked. The loudest ones are usually the most scared. But the quiet ones, the ones who listen, who wait, who know their worth without shouting it, those are the ones you never see coming. And they're the ones that win. Deshaun didn't speak. He just stared, and for once, he listened. Strength, she said, isn't about who yells loudest. It's about who listens longest. And the ones who really know their strength, those are the ones you don't want to test. Deshaun lowered his head. His voice was small now. I ain't never had anybody talk to me like that, he admitted. Not in a way that felt real. Mrs. Freeman nodded. That's the problem. Y'all so used to folks either yelling or walking away, you don't know what to do when someone stays. The room went quiet again. It wasn't awkward. It was full of truth, full of weight, full of something new. Then she said something he'd never forget. You think you're broken, but you're not. You're bruised, and bruises heal, but only if you stop poking at them. Deshaun looked up. His eyes were glassy. You think I could change? She didn't hesitate. I don't think, I know. Then came the part that reached deeper than he expected. But you gotta stop treating kindness like it's an attack, and every correction like it's a threat. He nodded slowly, and in a voice so quiet it barely reached her. I'm sorry. She stood, walked around the desk, and placed her hand gently on his shoulder. You've already started, she said. Now don't stop. And just when it looked like Deshaun was finally starting to change, the real test arrived. The next morning, he walked through the doors of Booker T. Washington Middle School differently. No loud sneakers, no barking jokes, no Rico, Jalen, or Snoop trailing behind. Just Deshaun, backpack on one shoulder, and a head full of things he hadn't sorted yet. He passed the security guard, no smirk, just a small, respectful nod, a real one. By the time he reached room 214, the bell hadn't even rung. Mrs. Freeman was already inside, wiping the whiteboard clean, and in that same bold handwriting, today's quote was written across the front. "A strong man learns, a wise man listens." Deshaun didn't take his usual seat in the back. This time, he chose a desk near the front, not because he had something to prove, but because he was ready to stop hiding. As students trickled in, a few gave him curious glances, like they weren't sure who he was anymore, but no one said anything. The energy had shifted. It was lighter. Mrs. Freeman caught his eye and gave a single nod. Not a smile, not a speech, just the nod. The kind of nod that says, "I see you, but life doesn't change without throwing you a curveball." It was third period when it came. Deshaun was walking alone through the hallway, delivering papers for a teacher, minding his business, head down, focused. That's when he showed up. Darren Clay, 8th grader, same age, built like a linebacker, loud, angry, always needing to dominate the space. Deshaun and Darren had butted heads before. Little stuff, nothing major. But today, Darren was looking for a target. As Deshaun passed, Darren stuck out his arm and bumped him hard in the shoulder, hard enough to make Deshaun stumble. The hallway froze. Kids nearby stopped, watching, waiting. Darren turned, arms wide. "Oh, you not gonna say nothing? What, you soft now?" In the past, heck, even yesterday, Deshaun might have swung, pushed him into a locker, started yelling, walked straight into another suspension. But today, Deshaun stood his ground, didn't raise a fist, didn't raise his voice. He looked Darren in the eyes and simply asked, "You good, man? You need something?" Darren blinked. Didn't expect that. Deshaun didn't wait. He just kept walking, not faster, not like he was scared, just walking calm. Behind him, Darren muttered, "Man, whatever." But his voice had lost something. At the end of the hall, Mrs. Freeman stepped out of a classroom. She'd seen the whole thing. As Deshaun passed, she said just one word, "Progress." He nodded. Didn't smile. He didn't need to. That afternoon, back in room 214, Mrs. Freeman didn't open a textbook. She didn't give a lecture. She sat on the edge of her desk and told a story, a real one. She told them about her first year in the Army, about almost quitting, about being overlooked, about how one day her drill sergeant, a man built like steel, looked her dead in the eye and said, "Freeman, you walk like a whisper, but your presence shakes the room." She paused, looked around the class. "Every one of you has that power," she said, "but only if you stop wasting it trying to impress people who don't even know who they are yet." Deshaun heard every word, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he didn't need applause, didn't need backup, didn't need to be feared. He had something better now. Control, peace, self-respect. When the final bell rang, Deshaun waited until the room cleared out. Then he walked up to Mrs. Freeman's desk. "Thanks," he said quietly. She didn't ask. For what? She didn't need to. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small folded piece of paper, and handed it to him. Inside was a quote, handwritten in those same bold, clean letters. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the strongest. Sometimes it's just the most afraid. Deshaun folded it carefully and slipped it into his pocket, and he would carry it with him, through high school, through his hardest choices, through life. Long after Mrs. Freeman returned to retirement, long after room 214 became someone else's classroom. Because some lessons don't come from textbooks. They come from people who show up, stand still, and tell you the truth, even when it stings. And sometimes, that's exactly what saves you. If this story moved you, share it. Because somewhere out there, someone might be one decision away from a better path. And all they need is a reminder. Change is possible. And strength, real strength, it's quiet, but it stays.